The smell of lilies and old wood polish filled the cramped funeral home as I adjusted my black tie for the 100th time. Grandma Rose lay peaceful in her casket, hands folded over the same worn Bible she'd read every morning for 70 years. I'd been dreading this moment since I moved back to Millbrook 3 years ago, abandoning my corner office in Chicago to save her farm from foreclosure. "Jake, honey, you look tired." Aunt Martha's voice cut through my thoughts, her perfume overwhelming the flowers. Behind her stood my cousins Danny and Rick, both eyeing me with barely concealed resentment. They'd made their feelings clear when I'd chosen dirt roads over dividends. "Someone had to take care of her," I replied, my voice hoarser than intended. The past 3 years had aged me more than the previous 10. Sleepless nights worrying about crop yields and bank payments had carved new lines around my eyes. "Well, that's all behind us now," Danny said, straightening his expensive suit. "Time to be practical about the property." I felt my jaw clench. Even here, at her funeral, they were already circling like vultures. Grandma Rose had built something beautiful on that land, not just a farm, but a sanctuary. The thought of them selling it to developers made my stomach turn. The pastor began the service, but my mind wandered to the envelope Grandma had pressed into my hands just weeks before she passed. "Don't open this until after the funeral, Jake. Promise me." Her eyes had held secrets I'd never understood. That envelope now burned in my jacket pocket like a live coal. 3 years earlier, the phone call came at 2 a.m., jolting me from another restless night in my downtown Chicago apartment. Grandma's voice was weak, frightened. "Jake, they're going to take the farm. The bank, they say I owe more than it's worth." I'd stared out at the city lights, my reflection ghost-like in the window. At 44, I was pulling down 6 figures as a financial consultant, climbing the corporate ladder with ruthless efficiency. My ex-wife, Sarah, had taken half my assets in the divorce, claiming I loved money more than her. Maybe she was right. "How much do you need, Grandma?" $200,000. "But Jake, I can't ask you to." "I'm coming home." The decision surprised even me. Within 6 months, I'd liquidated my retirement accounts, sold my condo, and walked away from everything I'd built. My colleagues thought I'd lost my mind. "You're throwing your life away for a dying farm," my boss had said. But as I'd driven down the gravel road to Grandma's house that first day, seeing her face light up on the porch, I'd known it was right. The farm wasn't dying, it was waiting. Waiting for someone who understood that some things were worth more than their market value. I'd learned to work the land with hands that had only known keyboards. Grandma taught me about soil and seasons, about patience and faith. "This land has stories, Jake," she'd say, running dirt through her fingers. "Stories that need protecting." Now she was gone, and I was the only one left who understood what she meant. The lawyer's office smelled like leather and disappointment. Mr. Henderson had been the family attorney for 30 years, his hands shaking slightly as he opened Grandma's will. Danny and Rick sat forward eagerly while I slumped in my chair, emotionally drained from the morning's service. "Rose Morrison was very specific about her wishes," Henderson began, adjusting his glasses. "To my grandson, Jake Morrison, who sacrificed his career to care for me and preserve our family legacy, I leave the farmhouse and surrounding 40 acres. I felt a mix of relief and sadness. 40 acres wasn't much, but it included the heart of the property, the house where 4 generations of Morrisons had lived and died. However, Henderson continued, the remaining 160 acres, including all mineral rights and water access, are to be divided equally between Daniel and Richard Morrison. The room erupted. Danny pumped his fist while Rick was already on his phone, probably calling developers. My heart sank. They'd gotten the valuable land, the part that could be subdivided and sold. I'd be left with a house surrounded by strip malls and parking lots. "There's one more thing," Henderson said, raising his voice over their celebration. "Jake, your grandmother left you this." He handed me a small brass key. She said you'd know what it opens. I turned the key over in my palm, feeling its weight. It was old, ornate, unlike any key I'd seen around the farm. Danny and Rick barely glanced at it, too busy planning their windfall. But Grandma's words echoed in my memory. This land has stories, Jake. Stories that need protecting. Maybe this key would unlock one of them. Back at the farmhouse, I sat at Grandma's kitchen table staring at the brass key. The house felt impossibly quiet without her humming while she cooked, or the sound of her rocking chair creaking on the porch. I'd been so focused on saving the farm that I'd never really explored its mysteries. The key was definitely old, maybe 19th century. Its head was decorated with intricate engravings that looked almost Native American. I'd never seen Grandma use it, but she must have kept it for a reason. I started in the obvious places: desk drawers, jewelry boxes, the old trunk in her bedroom. Nothing. Then I remembered the basement. Grandma had always discouraged me from going down there, claiming it was just storage and too dangerous with the old wooden stairs. The basement was exactly as she'd described, cluttered with decades of farm equipment, canning jars, and furniture covered in dusty sheets. But as I moved deeper into the space, my flashlight beam caught something unusual. Behind a stack of wooden crates was a door I'd never noticed before. The door was small, maybe 5 feet tall, built into what I'd assumed was just the foundation wall. My heart raced as I cleared away the crates. The wood was different from the rest of the basement, older, darker, with the same intricate carvings I'd seen on the key. My hands trembled as I inserted the key. It turned with surprising ease, as if it had been waiting for this moment. The door swung open on silent hinges, revealing a narrow stone passage that disappeared into darkness. The air that flowed out was cool and carried a scent I couldn't identify. Something earthy and ancient, like the smell of deep caves or very old wood. I stepped inside. The passage was longer than I'd expected, carved directly into the bedrock beneath the farm. My flashlight beam danced across stone walls that showed clear tool marks. This wasn't a natural cave, but something deliberately constructed. After about 30 feet, the passage opened into a circular chamber roughly the size of Grandma's living room. I gasped. The walls were covered in paintings, not the crude scratches I might have expected, but sophisticated artwork depicting scenes of daily life, hunting, and ceremony. The pigments had faded but remained vibrant enough to make out human figures, animals, and symbols I didn't recognize. In the center of the chamber sat a stone platform holding what appeared to be artifacts, pottery shards, arrowheads, and tools made from bone and stone. Everything was carefully arranged, as if someone had created a museum display. But what stopped me cold was a modern addition to the ancient space. A wooden table holding a stack of papers, all in Grandma's handwriting. The top sheet was a letter addressed to me. "My dearest Jake," it began. "If you're reading this, then you found what I've been protecting all these years. This chamber was discovered by your great-great-grandfather when he first settled this land in 1887. Instead of reporting it or disturbing it, he chose to preserve it. Every generation since has been its guardian." My hands shook as I continued reading. The artifacts were from the Potawatomi tribe that had lived here for centuries before European settlement. The chamber itself was a sacred burial site, hidden and protected by my family for over 130 years. "The developers who've been circling our land don't know what lies beneath it," Grandma's letter continued. "But I've spent years researching, documenting, preparing. This discovery could change everything, Jake. Not just for our family, but for the entire community." I looked around the chamber with new eyes, understanding finally dawning. This wasn't just about saving a farm. It was about preserving history itself. I spent hours in the chamber reading through Grandma's meticulous notes. She'd been in contact with archaeologists, historians, and tribal representatives for years, building a case for the site's historical significance. Her research was thorough, professional. She'd documented every artifact, every painting, every detail of the chamber's construction. One folder contained correspondence with Dr. Sarah Blackhorse from the University of Wisconsin's Anthropology Department. The letters revealed a friendship spanning decades, built around their shared commitment to preserving Native American heritage. Dr. Blackhorse had been waiting for the right moment to make the site's existence public, a moment that would ensure its protection rather than its exploitation. Another folder held legal documents I didn't fully understand, but recognized as important. Historical surveys, land grants, and what appeared to be preliminary paperwork for National Historic Landmark designation. Grandma had been building a fortress of legal protection around this place. But the most shocking discovery was a recent appraisal hidden in the back of the stack. The chamber and its contents weren't just historically significant. They were potentially worth millions. Not as artifacts to be sold, but as the centerpiece of a cultural heritage site that could bring tourism, research grants, and federal protection funding to the entire region. I understood now why Grandma had structured her will the way she did. Danny and Rick had inherited the land, but they didn't know what lay beneath it. I had inherited the key, literally and figuratively, to its true value. My phone buzzed with a text from Danny. Found a developer interested in the back 40. Meeting tomorrow. This is going to make us rich. I stared at the message, then at the ancient paintings surrounding me. Grandma had trusted me with more than a secret. She'd trusted me with a choice. I could reveal the chamber and watch my cousins' dreams of quick money evaporate. Or I could let them sell the land and watch 130 years of family guardianship end in bulldozers and strip malls. The weight of that choice felt heavier than the stone walls around me. The next morning, I found Danny and Rick at the kitchen table with a man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as Marcus Webb from Heartland Development. They'd made themselves at home, spreading maps and surveys across Grandma's antique table like conquering generals planning their campaign. "Jake!" Danny stood up, grinning. "Perfect timing. Marcus here is offering us $2 million for the back 160. Can you believe it? Grandma's old cornfield is going to make us millionaires." Webb nodded enthusiastically. "Prime location for a shopping complex. Close enough to the interstate, far enough from town to avoid zoning hassles. We can break ground within 6 months." I felt sick. What about Grandma's wishes? She loved this land. "Grandma's dead," Rick said bluntly. "And love doesn't pay property taxes. You want to play farmer with your 40 acres? Fine. But we're not going to let sentiment cost us a fortune." "There's something you need to know," I began, but Danny cut me off. "Look, Jake, we appreciate what you did for Grandma. Really. But you made your choice when you gave up your career to play in the dirt. This is our chance to make something of ourselves." Webb was studying his tablet, clearly uncomfortable with the family tension. "If there are any concerns about the sale, we should address them now. My investors don't like surprises." I looked at my cousins, really looked at them. Danny had always been the dreamer, chasing get-rich-quick schemes that never panned out. Rick was more practical, but equally desperate, struggling to support his family on a teacher's salary. They saw this land as their lottery ticket, their escape from lives they'd never quite managed to build. "I need 24 hours, I said finally. "Before you sign anything, give me 24 hours. Danny frowned. "For what?" "You don't have any legal claim to our portion. Just trust me, please. One day." Webb looked annoyed, but Rick surprised me by nodding. "One day, Jake, but then we're moving forward with or without your blessing." After they left, I sat alone in Grandma's kitchen, feeling the weight of generations pressing down on me. I had less than 24 hours to decide the fate of something that had been protected for over a century. I called Dr. Sarah Blackhorse that afternoon, my hands shaking as I dialed the number from Grandma's correspondence. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm but cautious. "Jake Morrison, Rose's grandson. I've been expecting your call. You knew about the chamber?" I've known about it for 23 years. Your grandmother was one of the most dedicated preservationists I've ever worked with. She understood that timing was everything. Reveal too early, and the site gets damaged by amateur treasure hunters or destroyed by those who see it as an obstacle. Too late, and development makes preservation impossible. Dr. Blackhorse agreed to drive down immediately. While I waited, I returned to the chamber with better lighting and a camera, documenting everything as Grandma had taught me. The paintings were even more remarkable in proper light, sophisticated artistic techniques that spoke of a rich, complex culture. When Dr. Blackhorse arrived that evening, she was a compact woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. Her reaction to the chamber was everything I'd hoped for. "Extraordinary," she whispered, running her fingers along the painted walls. "This level of preservation is unprecedented in this region. The artwork alone represents a significant gap in our understanding of pre-contact Potawatomi culture." She spent hours examining the artifacts, taking measurements, making notes. "Jake, this site could rewrite textbooks, but more importantly, it could serve as a bridge between past and present, a place where native and non-native communities can come together to honor shared history. My cousins want to sell to developers tomorrow." Dr. Blackhorse nodded grimly. "Rose mentioned that possibility. She hoped you'd find a way to prevent it." "How?" "By understanding that this chamber isn't just about the past, it's about the future. A properly managed heritage site could bring sustainable income to your community for generations. Tourism, research partnerships, educational programs. Your grandmother saw the bigger picture." As we climbed back up to the farmhouse, Dr. Blackhorse handed me a business card. "I've been working with tribal representatives and federal agencies for years, preparing for this moment. If you're willing to fight for this place, you won't be fighting alone." I looked back at the basement door, thinking about the choice ahead of me. Grandma had given me more than a key. She'd given me the power to shape the future. I barely slept that night, tossing between dreams of ancient voices and the harsh reality of family conflict. By dawn, I'd made my decision. I called Danny and Rick, asking them to meet me at the farm before their appointment with Webb. They arrived looking impatient and slightly hungover. "Jake, whatever you're planning, just remember we've got a legal right to sell," Danny warned. "I know, but before you do, there's something you need to see." I led them to the basement, ignoring their confused protests. When I opened the hidden door, their complaints died in their throats. The chamber, lit by the portable lights I'd set up, was breathtaking in its ancient majesty. "What the hell?" Rick breathed, stepping inside like a man in a trance. I explained everything: the family history of guardianship, Grandma's research, the site's potential significance. Danny and Rick listened in stunned silence, their dreams of quick money crumbling as they realized what they'd almost destroyed. "This is why Grandma structured the will the way she did," I concluded. "She knew you'd inherit the land, but she trusted me to show you its true value." Danny sank onto a rock, head in his hands. "We almost sold a piece of history for shopping mall money." "It's not too late," I said. "Dr. Blackhorse has been working on federal protection status. With this site properly preserved and developed as a heritage center, it could bring sustainable income to the entire community for generations." Rick was studying the painted walls, his teacher's mind clearly working. "The educational value alone. Kids from across the region could come here to learn about Native American culture, about preservation, about respecting the past." When Webb arrived an hour later, he found 3 united cousins waiting for him. Danny delivered the news with surprising grace. "We've decided not to sell. The land stays in the family." Webb's face went through several shades of red. "You can't be serious. We had an agreement." "We had a conversation," Rick corrected. "No contracts were signed." After Webb stormed off, threatening lawsuits that would never materialize, we sat in Grandma's kitchen, planning a future none of us had imagined 24 hours earlier. 6 months later, the Morrison Heritage Site was officially designated as a National Historic Landmark. The ceremony took place on a crisp October morning, with representatives from the Potawatomi Nation, the University of Wisconsin, and the National Park Service gathered around the farmhouse that had sheltered secrets for so long. I stood at the podium, looking out at faces that had become familiar over the months of planning and preparation. Dr. Blackhorse sat in the front row next to tribal elder Joseph Crow Feather, whose great-great-grandfather had once walked these same fields. Danny and Rick flanked Grandma's empty rocking chair, which we'd placed on the porch as a symbol of her continuing presence. My grandmother, Rose Morrison, understood something that took me years to learn, I began, my voice carrying across the gathered crowd. She knew that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the stories we preserve and the legacy we leave behind. The Heritage Center had already exceeded our wildest expectations. Federal grants and private donations had funded the construction of a visitor center and research facility. The chamber itself remained carefully protected, accessible only through guided tours that honored both its sacred nature and its educational value. Danny had surprised everyone by enrolling in museum management courses, discovering a passion for preservation he'd never known he possessed. Rick had taken a sabbatical from teaching to develop educational programs that brought the site's history to life for students of all ages. As for me, I'd found something I'd never expected when I gave up my corporate career, a sense of purpose that went beyond personal success. The Heritage Center employed 12 people full-time and brought thousands of visitors to our small community each year. The economic impact was already transforming Millbrook from a dying farm town into a thriving cultural destination. But the real transformation was deeper than economics. The site had become a bridge between communities, a place where native and non-native people could come together to honor shared history and build understanding for the future. The hardest part hadn't been the logistics of preservation or the politics of federal designation. It had been learning to see beyond my own small vision of success. For years, I'd measured my worth in salary figures and stock options, then later in crop yields and bank balances. But Grandma had been teaching me a different kind of arithmetic all along. Standing in the chamber one evening, 6 months after the dedication ceremony, I finally understood what she'd been trying to show me. The ancient paintings on the walls weren't just historical artifacts. They were proof that humans had always struggled with the same fundamental question: what do we leave behind? The Potawatomi artists who had created this sacred space had chosen to leave beauty, meaning, and connection to something larger than themselves. My great-great-grandfather had chosen to protect rather than profit. Grandma had chosen to preserve rather than sell. Each generation had faced the same choice between immediate gain and lasting legacy. My phone buzzed with a text from my old boss in Chicago. "Heard about your heritage site? Impressive work? Ready to come back to the real world yet?" I smiled, typing back, "I'm already in the real world. Took me a while to find it." The truth was, I'd never been happier. The work was challenging in ways my corporate job had never been, requiring creativity, diplomacy, and a deep understanding of both history and human nature. But it was also deeply satisfying in ways I'd never experienced. Every school group that visited, every researcher who made a discovery, every moment of understanding between cultures was a dividend that couldn't be measured in dollars. Danny and Rick had found their own versions of fulfillment. Danny's natural charisma made him perfect for leading tours and working with donors. Rick's teaching skills had evolved into designing programs that made ancient history relevant to modern students. We'd all discovered that Grandma's true inheritance wasn't land or money. It was the opportunity to be part of something meaningful. 2 years after the heritage site opened, I was invited to speak at a conference on rural economic development. Standing before an audience of mayors, planners, and preservationists, I shared the story of how a dying farm had become a thriving cultural center. The Morrison Heritage Site now employs 23 people and brings over 50,000 visitors annually to a town that was losing population for decades, I explained. But the real success isn't in the numbers. It's in the transformation of how our community sees itself. The ripple effects had been extraordinary. Local restaurants and bed and breakfasts had opened to serve visitors. Artists had moved to the area, drawn by the cultural atmosphere. The high school had developed a nationally recognized program in archaeological preservation. Property values had risen, but in a way that strengthened rather than displaced the existing community. Most importantly, the site had fostered genuine relationships between the Potawatomi Nation and local residents. Annual powwows, educational exchanges, and collaborative research projects had created bonds that went far beyond tourism. Children who might never have learned about Native American culture were now growing up with deep respect for indigenous history and contemporary tribal communities. After my presentation, a young woman approached me. "My name is Sarah Morrison Webb," she said. "I'm a graduate student in anthropology, and I'm writing my thesis on community-based preservation. I believe we might be related." It turned out she was the great-granddaughter of my grandfather's brother, family I'd never known existed. She'd been drawn to the field of preservation, partly because of stories about our family's guardianship of the site. The Heritage Center had literally brought lost family members back together. That evening, I called Dr. Blackhorse to share the news. "Rose would be so proud," she said. She always believed that protecting the past was really about creating the future. As I hung up, I realized that Grandma's vision had been even larger than I'd understood. She hadn't just saved a historical site. She'd planted seeds for generations of growth, understanding, and connection. 5 years after Grandma's funeral, I stood in the same cemetery where this journey had begun. But everything had changed. The small country graveyard was now part of a heritage trail that connected the Morrison site with other historical locations throughout the region. Grandma's headstone bore a new inscription: "Guardian of Stories, Builder of Bridges." The anniversary of the heritage site's opening had become an annual celebration, drawing visitors from across the Midwest. This year's ceremony had been particularly special. The Potawatomi Nation had officially recognized our family as honorary tribal members for our century-plus commitment to protecting their ancestors' sacred space. I thought about the man I'd been 5 years ago, sitting in that funeral home, worried about bank payments and crop yields. That man had been so focused on saving a farm that he'd almost missed saving something infinitely more valuable. Grandma had known I needed to discover the difference between preserving property and preserving purpose. My phone rang, Danny calling from the visitor center. "Jake, you need to get down here. We just had our 100,000th visitor, and she's asking specifically for you." I drove down the familiar gravel road, past fields that now hosted archaeological research plots alongside traditional crops. The visitor center parking lot was full, as it usually was on weekends. Inside, I found Danny talking with an elderly Native American woman whose eyes held the same quiet wisdom I remembered in Grandma's face. "This is Jake Morrison," Danny said. "Jake, meet Agnes Crow Feather, Joseph's aunt. She has something special to share." Agnes took my hands in hers, her grip surprisingly strong. "Your grandmother and I corresponded for many years," she said. "She asked me to give you this when the time was right." She handed me a small leather pouch, worn smooth by countless hands. Inside was a piece of pottery, clearly ancient, with symbols that matched those painted on the chamber walls. "This was found on our reservation land in Wisconsin," Agnes explained. "It proves that our peoples traded and traveled between these sites for centuries. Your family didn't just preserve one sacred place. You preserved a connection between communities separated by time and distance." As I held the pottery fragment, feeling its weight and age, I understood that Grandma's final gift wasn't just about the past. It was about the future we were still building together. The heritage site had become exactly what she'd envisioned. A place where stories lived, where cultures connected, and where the true meaning of wealth was measured not in what we took from the land, but in what we gave back to it. Walking home that evening, I passed the old farmhouse where 4 generations of Morrisons had learned the difference between owning land and belonging to it. Tomorrow would bring new visitors, new discoveries, new connections between past and future. And I would be there to welcome them, carrying forward the legacy that Grandma had entrusted to my care. The land had stories, just as she'd always said, and finally, I had learned how to listen.